What are the assertions and the promises made by the management in relation to the financial position? It is REVAC. Like I made a mnemonic for statement of profit and loss, that is O3C cap. Similarly, I came up with this mnemonic as REVAC. For for R, it is rights and obligations. Okay. And then for E, it is existence. For V, it is valuation. For A, it is accuracy. So accuracy and valuation are quite similar. Then for C, it is completeness. And in this C again, you have these three C's already included. So once you see the C, you now know that there are total three C's: completeness, cutoff, and classification. So completeness, cutoff, classification. These are the assertions or the promises made by the management. Now we will look at these assertions one by one. Now, what is existence? When I talked about the statement of profit and loss, what all is recorded in statement of profit and loss? First, you have the revenue column, then you have the cost of goods sold is being deducted, and then you have the gross profit, right? And then it is the indirect expenses or the administrative expenses being deducted, and after all the expenses you get the net profit before tax. This is what is presented in statement of profit and loss, right? So these, you can't check the existence of revenue. You can check the occurrence of revenue, but you can't check the existence of revenue. How would revenue exist? It can occur, sales can occur, but sales can't exist. But in statement of financial position, we have assets and liabilities. Assets like plant and machinery, land and buildings, equipments. Liabilities, what are assets other than this? Receivables, the current assets, right? Then in liabilities, you can have long-term liabilities like loans, you can have payables, you can have payables, right? So these are all the liabilities and assets presented in the statement of financial position. Now for them, I can't check their occurrence. I can't check their occurrence. I can't check their that they have occurred or not, but I can check their existence. I can check if the plant and machinery exists with me or not. I can please put your mics on mute. I can check the existence of plant and machinery by physically verifying that plant and machinery. I can visit the site. Do you agree in this? I can visit the site, I can visit the building I own, I can actually touch the equipments I have in my storage room. I can check the, the receivables. I can talk to them that you are my debtor and you owe me this much amount. So these are kind of things which can be checked in relation to their existence. So what is basically existence? Existence means that assets and liabilities really do exist and there has been no overstatement for assets and understatements for liabilities. So what is the default risk of assets and liability? Default risk. I have also discussed this previously, but again, because some of you are attending for the first time. So, uh, Shamir, occurrence can be checked, but it is being checked for the statement of profit and loss items. It is not checked for assets and liabilities. Assets don't occur, they exist. But sales occur, purchase occur. Do you get this point? So we have different assertions for statement of profit and loss and different for the statement of financial position. For statement of profit and loss, as we did yesterday's O3C cap. For statement of financial position, it is REVAC. I am now covering the E part. Okay. So for the assets, what is the default risk? The default risk is that the assets would be overstated, because that's what the mentality of the management is, to overstate their assets and present a lucrative picture to the potential investors. Lucrative picture, right? And what is the risk for liabilities? They are, by default, they are being at risk of being understated. You may tell your shareholders or potential investors that I don't have so many liabilities, when you actually do have a lot of them, right? So for that, we check their existence. To check the the intention of the management, auditor checks the existence of the assets to ensure that they are not overstated, and he checks the existence of the liabilities to check they are not understated. So how you check the existence? There are relevant tests. And what is the relevant test? The relevant test is physical verification of non-current assets, circularization of receivables, payables, and the bank letter. So if I physically verify the plant and machinery, it would be a relevant test to check the existence of the asset. Similarly, if I circularize the receivables, now this is a new term for you, we didn't deal with it yesterday. What is circularization of receivables? If you remember, yesterday I talked about a term, customer statement, right? So what was the customer statement? The customer statement was being sent to the customer by the entity, or you can say the management, to the customer to ask if they about the balance they have in their accounts in relation to us. As I took the example that one of you has 18,000 in their accounts, but according to me, you guys owe me $20,000, right? So we monthly reconcile the customer statement with the memorandum, that is the individual accounts, where the individual customer accounts are there, right? And then we monthly reconcile the control account with the memorandum. What is control account? Where there is aggregation. Now this is a practice being followed by the management. But when the auditor comes into the picture, now I'm talking about the auditor. He is not responsible for these, practices. He is here to check these practices. He is the examiner. He is not the doer, he is just the examiner. So auditor, when asks the entity, when auditor asks the entity that send these customer statement or tell me your correspondence with the customer, that is known as circularization. When auditor makes the entity send the customer statement to ensure or to verify the existence of the receivables or the debtors, that is known as circularization. Now there are two types of circularization. One is positive and one is negative. Okay. What is positive circularization? when the auditor takes the company's letterhead is a paper with the stamp of the company, and on that letter the auditor writes the contents which he requires from the customer. Now, on that content, it depends whether it is a positive circularization or it is a negative circularization. So, if I talk about positive circularization, what do they write in that letter? They ask if this is the balance in your account. You ask the customer that this is the balance in my account. Is it true? The customer has to reply any which ways. The customer is required to reply if it is true or if it is false. If it is 20,000, that doesn't mean the customer won't reply, because what is positive circularization? He's asking if it is 20,000 or not. What is negative? Negative is when you say only reply if it is not 20,000. If it is 20,000, then I will take your silence as, a sign of acceptance that it is 20,000. But if you reply, if you retaliate that this is not 20,000, then we will consider the reasons why we have this difference in our accounts. According to me, it is 20,000, but if according to you it is not 20,000, only then reply. So this is a negative circularization. Got it? So when you send a negative circularization, it is kind of a risky thing, right? What if the customer actually forgets to reply when he knows that he has 18,000 of balance? It is a risky procedure, because if he doesn't reply to the positive circularization, we will chase him because we need his reply anyway, even if it is 20,000 or not 20,000. But if in case of negative circularization, the customer doesn't reply, but there is a difference in accounts, and he doesn't reply, and we take his non-repliance as a sign of positivity that yes, maybe it's 20,000 in his accounts also. That's the reason he has not replied. But actually, the customer was busy in his stuff and he didn't reply. So now you have wrong balances in your accounts of financial statements. You have wrong balances in the receivables account. So this is a risky circularization, and this only takes place in the companies. Negative circularization, it only takes place in the companies where the internal controls are really great. Controls are great. Fine. So if the controls are great, you will say that I am 99% sure that my balance 20,000 is correct. It's just for the sake of 1% that I'm sending this circularization. The auditor is thinking of sending a circularization to the receivables because just 1% risk is there that it may not be correct. So that is when you actually send the negative circularization. So this was a concept, but as I was on the assertions, I explained you what existence is and how you can check the existence. The second assertion is rights and obligations. What are rights and obligations? Now, if you have done F7 or you have any idea about anything to classify as an asset or for anything to classify as a liability, this was also in F3. So we say something is an asset only if we have the control over it, if it will give rise to economic inflow of resources in future, economic inflow, right? So these were like the basic criterias for anything to be met, the definition of an asset. Now what do I mean by control here? If I have a control over something, it is the right I'm talking about. If a mother has a control over her child who is 5 years old, she has a right to scold him, she has a right to order him that, okay, now you are not supposed to go there, you are to sit here. So this is a kind of a control. What is the synonym for control? It is the right. So if I purchase plant and machinery, I have a right over it. No one else can come and tell me how to use this. This is the right. So for checking the right, what the auditor do? Now some businesses or the entities, what they do is they don't have the right over the asset. For example, it is a lease. Lease is when you rent things. When you rent things. So if something is being rented, I have a building which is I have it on rent. Now what if I include it in an asset classification, because I think this is giving rise to economic inflow. Now the auditor will come, okay, auditor will come when he will check the right of that building which is actually being taken on rent, because the management didn't have the accounting knowledge. They said that this building is giving rise to economic inflow of resources, so we think it is good to be classified as an asset. But when the auditor will come into the picture, he will check the rights of that asset. He will ask the management, give me the papers of acquisition. Give me the papers of acquisition when you acquired it. Deeds of title. Deeds of title. Whenever you acquire a plot of land, a building, you have some papers, you have some attorney, so something is there. So auditor will check that to ensure that you actually have right, because in a rented building, you don't have right over things, so that will not classify as an asset. But this is the responsibility of the auditor. This is the responsibility of the auditor to check the rights. Then similar is the case with the liability. Now you need in the case of liability, you don't have a right, but you have an obligation. Obligation is that you have to pay someone or you owe someone something. That is the obligation. So the entity has an obligation to repay a liability. So that is also being checked by the auditor. How he checks the existence of the obligation? He checks it by the reference to the loan document. There is a loan document. Whenever you take a loan, there is a provision of a loan document by the bank to you, where every term is being listed, what the loan is being provided, and how many years you will be giving back the loan, what is the rate of interest. So everything is listed there, and this is a way, it is a document, supporting document, or the source document from where you can check whether you have an obligation or not. So if there's an obligation where things are like, I just say that I owe you because you gave me something before. Suppose A company, okay, A company thinks because B company saved me from drowning, okay, I was in coronavirus situation, my company was drowning, and B company gave me some kind of business advice for which I paid it there and then. But I think that emotionally I owe him something. And what if that A company includes it as a liability in its financial statements? That's so stupid. So for that, the auditor will check that, do you even have some document which states that you owe them something? Right? So that is the reason we check the rights and obligations. Now another is the valuation and the accuracy. Now this is same as we did in statement of profit and loss. Valuation and accuracy. What's that? that the assets and liabilities and the equity interest. What are the equity interests? The shareholder funds. In any financial statement or in any statement of financial position, there is this column as equity. Equity is the share capital and the reserves. Share capital plus reserves. Reserves include the retained earnings. What is the profit of the company? That is the retained earnings. Right? So that is equity. It is a part of, it has a credit balance and it is a, okay, I can change the color. Shamir. I don't think I can change the color here. Anyway. So equity interest is also a kind of a liability for which I need to check the valuation, that if the share capital is being correctly evaluated and presented. I need to calculate that I am presenting it either at the fair value or at the face value. There is one thing as face value and one thing as the fair value or the market value. So you can use any method of recording the share capital. So that is a topic of FR. I won't get deep into it anyways. So this was valuation. And what was the third one is completeness. What is completeness? That there is no omission and assets and liability that should have been recorded and disclosed are actually being recorded. So what was required, we have done that. We have not omitted any asset, we have not omitted any liability. How you can check this? What is the relevant test for it? You can check it by reconciling of the payables ledger balances to the supplier statements. So again, for checking the completeness, you can refer to the supporting documents or the source documents. So in case of, if I talk about the receivables, who are the current assets in my statement of financial positions, how will I test whether they are completely recorded or not? I will refer back to the ledger. First, I will refer back to the ledger, the receivables ledger, right? And then I will refer back to the, what is the next? That next is the invoice. From invoice, I will refer back to the goods dispatch note. From goods dispatch note, I will refer back to the order received. This is my chain. So this is the audit trail. What we call it as audit trail. This way I can check the completeness. I can also move either way. I can check first the order received, then the GDN, then the invoice, then the ledger, and then the receivables. So when I move from the ledger to the invoice, when I move from the ledger to the invoice, that is vouching. We call it as vouching. And when I move from the invoice to the ledger, that is tracing. That is tracing. I am tracing the invoice where it has gone, and from the ledger to the invoice, I am vouching the accounting records to confirm that for everything recorded there is a voucher. Okay. So this was about the, any doubt up till here? Okay, great. So let's move forward, and now you know what is presentation, what is classification, what is cutoff, everything you know. The tests are similar, and you can read this from your notes which are being provided to you on the Google Classroom. I will open these notes today when we will do specific procedures. So let's move forward and check. Now, this was what auditor assertions were, something which the auditor needs to check. If someone is promising me something, I need to check that whether that person is meeting his promise or not. So same is the case of the auditor. He checks the promises made by the management. And now we will move. How do we check these? For single assertion, I told you some relevant tests, but what are the actual words for them? The actual words for them is A, E, I, O, U. That is the vowels. For A, it stands for the analytical procedures. These are the words you will use while writing the, procedures. Because in double A exam, there are direct questions from the procedures. They simply ask you list the procedures for depreciation, list the procedure for purchase and other expenses, list the procedures for sales, list the procedures for revenue expenditure or capital expenditure, list the procedure for payroll, list the procedure for bank and cash. That's how the question comes up in the exam. It's direct. Okay, so you need to write in a single line, like one procedure should end in one line. Keep it short and cute. Okay, so like if the question is for 5 marks, you need to list 5 procedures. Short and cute, take very less time, and if you get the skill, it will become your best part in the exam. You will feel so comfortable while writing the procedures. So you need to use these words. How you check the assertions? You do perform the analytical procedures. What are analytical procedures? It is actually ratios and trends. Ratios you have been doing, like gross profit margin ratio, return on capital employed ratio. So these are given in the notes. I will also give them to you individually, so you can refer to them. These are just the mere formulas you need to learn. And when there is a, like if the, I say if the gross profit margin ratio is, gross profit is rising, right? Gross profit margin ratio is rising and my expenses are increasing, but my revenue is same. So that is an inconsistent relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is an inconsistent relationship. That's why I need to look into the reasons why this is inconsistent. This should give auditor a sign of susceptibility that something is going wrong in this entity. How is this possible? They are doing some misstatement. So that's how the auditor comes to know about the risky areas and about the areas where the procedure should be substantive. What is substantive? Substantive is in-depth. In-depth checking. When the auditor do the in-depth checking, sometimes he just have the overview of the things. Like if the trend since 10 years is that the revenue rises 10% every year, the revenue rises 10% every year. That is the trend. So if in this year also it rose by 10%, that is like auditor will say it's okay. I just performed the analytical procedure. It was fine. No in-depth checking is required. So I will not get into the depth of checking the invoices and then matching them, reconciling them to the ledgers or forming a audit trail. I will not get into that. So analytical procedures are the first step which any auditor takes. He first performs the analytical procedures, then he decides whether this thing requires substantive procedures or whether this thing doesn't require substantive procedures. Fine. Now, the second thing which we have, okay, for analytical procedures, there's another point. In analytical procedures, you compare things. Okay, you compare things. How you compare, with which statement you compare? You compare it either with the previous year's financial statements, either you compare with the budgets. You make some budgets. Suppose if in my capital budget there was a prediction that I will purchase a $10,000 plant and machinery, and that happened. I purchased it. So this is quite clear that there is no misstatement regarding that. I compared it to the budget. Okay. So what is the third thing? You can also compare things to the standard industry practice. Like if I'm talking about the clothing industry in this COVID situation. Okay. If I talk about clothing industry, their sales have dropped significantly. No one is purchasing clothes these days. Okay. So if I if I'm auditing some clothing industry and I look at that there is a significant decrease in the revenue of that business, I will compare that decrease with the industry standard. That what is aggregately happening with the clothing industry as a whole. So if they are also experiencing, say, a decrease in sale of clothes by 40%, and I am also experiencing the decrease by 41%. So it is quite justifiable. Everything is quite straightforward, that everything is fine. There's no misstatement. It's happening to all, and there is no reason to doubt this account balance. Right? So that's analytical procedure. You compare it. You compare the financial statement with the previous year accounts, or with the budgets, or with the standard industry practice. And then you come up with any inconsistent relationship. Okay. I told you what is inconsistent relationship. That if it is industry practice is 40% and the entity's revenue has decreased by 80%, or it has not decreased at all. It is decreased by 0% and in fact rised by 10%. So that is a point of doubt. How did how did this happen? You will inquire from the management here. So this is an inconsistent relationship. Then there is significant increase or decrease. So if the what I can say is, if the receivables in the previous year were 10,000 and now in the current year the receivables came out to be 1 lakh. This is such an increase, such a big increase. The auditor needs to professionally, skeptically, investigate this aspect, that how does this increase happened? How did this increase happen of 90,000? How we have so many receivables in the current year when the in the previous year it was just 10,000? So this is why analytical procedures are used. So when we are talking about the audit procedures, the evidence stage or the procedure stage, what we do there, we first perform the analytical procedures, and after doing the analytical procedures, then we decide what amount of work is required for a particular account or for a particular balance of the transaction. So in analytical procedures, I told you what all we do. So after analytical procedures, we have the test of details. What is test of details? Where you check each and every transaction, or check each and every account balance. So if I'm talking about the account balance of the purchases in the statement of profit and loss, I will follow the audit trail. I will do the vouching. I will do the tracing. Now I will just use these words because now you are clear about them. I will use the audit trail is of two type: vouching and tracing. In tracing, I go from invoices to ledger, and in vouching, I go from ledger to invoices. So I will do this stuff. Vouching, I do. Why do I do the vouching? To check the occurrence. And why do I do the tracing? To check the completeness. Right? So I will check the account balance. I will check sample of transactions of each and every account balance. That is what test of details is. Then how you will check another assertions, another promises made by the management. By you, I mean the auditor. Okay, you are the auditors now. So what are the another words? I said AEIOU, right? For E, for E we have inquiry. What does happen? What happens in inquiry? You ask the management. You inquire the management. Like for example, if there was an increase in the non-current assets or there was some inconsistent relationship, you first ask the management. Then you inquire from the receivables, or you inquire from another third parties. Like you can inquire from the employees also. So this is a kind of inquiry which auditor does in case of any dispute or in case of any kind of checking going on. Auditor do inquire things from various parties, whether it is the management or the third parties. Okay, so this is what inquiry is. Then for I we have inspection. As I told you, we check the deed titles, the loan agreements, the title deeds of the plant and machinery of the building I have, of the land I have. I check the loan agreements. So we don't use the word check. We use the word inspect. That is an audit word. That is an audit word. So in your exam, you are supposed to use these words: inquire, inspect, right? So what is another? For O, O stands for observation. Now, what is observation? Like for inventory, what happens? What happens in inventory? Now, inventory is lying in my, say, warehouse. This is my warehouse, okay, and my inventory lies here. This is my inventory here. Now, every year, what happens is the auditor is supposed to observe the inventory count. Now, what is inventory count? The raw material or my already finished goods and products which are lying in my warehouse, I count them one by one. I count each and every product. If there are boxes, I will count each and every box. Right? So the auditor is not supposed to count these. The auditor is actually supposed to observe the inventory count to check if the management is doing effective and efficient counting of inventory, that they are following the standard procedures and everything is doing good. They are using the standard practices. Like there is no loophole or there is no wrongdoing going in the inventory count. So that is observation. Other than inventory count, what does the auditor observe? The auditor observe the controls. Like he will just give a surprise visit to the entity and he will say, "Hi, Peekaboo, I'm here to check what are you doing." So he will just check the controls. He will say that, okay, you guys work like this. Oh, there are CCTV cameras also. And how do you record the revenue? I will just observe. You do your work, I will just sit and observe. That's the work of the auditor. So he just observed the things. Then for you, what stands for you is understanding. So auditor also needs to understand what the nature of the business is, to whom he is, nature of business of the entity he is auditing, right? And for you, other things which I have included is in this U is recalculation and reperformance. These are the words you will use. What is recalculation now? If I say I have this much of the tax payable in my statements of account, I will recalculate. The auditor will recalculate it just to ensure that they are mathematically accurate. Accuracy was your assertion. So, what procedure I will write in the exam? I will write recalculate the tax payable or the corporation tax payable by multiplying the tax rate with the profit before tax to check the or to ensure the mathematical accuracy of the tax payable. That's how you will write the procedure. So what is reperformance? Reperformance is reperformance of some controls or reperformance of certain procedures. Like just to check whether the things in the entity are good or not, whether the controls are good or not, I will reperform things. Like I will reperform the workings, or I will reperform the, you know, taking out of the trial balance. Like yesterday I showed you the QuickBooks. From that you can take out the trial balance. So trial balance is extracted out of the ledgers, right? So the auditor can reperform this activity just to see whether the computerized things which we are using, the systems which we are using are correct or not. So he can also try to post some invoice. He will try to post an invoice into the QuickBooks and check how it works and whether it gives the accurate result or not. He will post the invoice and then he will check that whether that invoice was then carried forward to the ledger, and then from the ledger it was carried forward to the trial balance and to the financial statement. So that is reperformance. He does this on sample basis, not for everything but just for the sample basis. Now, how are you supposed to write? Before I move to the actual, you know, procedure specific to the specific areas, I will talk about generalized term, that is audit evidence. Now, what is audit evidence? It is the information obtained by the auditors in arriving at the conclusions on which the audit opinion is based. So, what is the objective of the audit? I covered this in the first class of AA. What is the objective of the audit? To give the opinion, give the audit opinion, right? Whether the statements are true and fair or not. This is the objective of the audit. But you can't give any opinion without any evidence. You need a you need an evidence. So this evidence is, what is the evidence? It is the information which is obtained by the auditors, and it comprises of the source documents. What could form the part of evidence? Source documents, accounting records, third is third is corroborating information. Corroborating information. Corroborating information. Fine. So you know what source documents are. If the entity has classified a rented apartment as an asset, so you will give the evidence of the source document, which is the lease agreement, that this is the lease agreement and this doesn't classify or this doesn't qualify to be classified as an asset because we don't have right over this apartment. So in this case, while presenting your audit opinion, you will give this lease agreement. Then you will provide accounting records. You will provide accounting records as the part of the evidence. Now, what are the accounting records you can provide? You can state the previous year uh, records, financial statements, and you can, tell the analytical procedure which you have performed. So that is a kind of accounting record which can be used as an evidence. What is corroborating information? This is the most important thing. Now, as I said, there is circularization of receivables. When you get the response back from that circularization, okay, that is a kind of third party confirmation. That is third party confirmation. What is the third party confirmation? Someone other than the auditor and the management. Two parties are involved in this whole process of audit, that is the management and the auditor. But when I talk to someone else other than these two, from any third party which I get any evidence, that is known as the corroborative information or the supporting information. So, if I'm talking about the evidence, okay, audit evidence, what is the most reliable source of evidence? Is it the management or is it the third party? I want your response over that. Yeah, Shamir has given others.
Third party.
Yeah, right. It is the third party. They are more reliable because, for example, when I don't know about what happens abroad. In India, when someone's marriage is fixed, okay. Now, what the both the parties do, the groom side and the bride side, okay, they inquire about the groom from their neighbors, from the place he works. They ask them that what's how he is. I'm talking about the arranged marriages. So they inquire about these things. So the parents of the bride side, will they believe what the parents of the groom say or will they believe what the neighbors of the groom say? Because the parents would always take the side of their son, right? So what is the most reliable resource in this case? It is the third party. It is the neighbors, the colleagues of the groom, who are not related to him but they know him. They have some kind of, you know transaction or some kind of relation with him, but they are not biased. So the only reason the third party is given more reliability is because they are not biased. Fine. So that is why always prefer to take third party confirmations. Always auditor always prefers that he should have a evidence in his hand which comes from the third party. Second, the reliability of the evidence is also on its form, whether it is verbal or it is written. So always prefer a written evidence, not the verbal one, because he may say that I never said this thing, but in written form You have this and you can record this, you can document it, you can present it in front of anyone, right? So this is the more reliable form of evidence. So then we have the difference between the, okay, before that, what the ISAs state. What are ISAs? ISAs are International Standards of Auditing. What do they state? They state that the audit evidence should be sufficient and appropriate. So whenever you come to any conclusion, whether it is a conclusion which says that the financial statements are true and fair, or whether it is a opinion which says that the financial statements are not true and fair, whatever it is, okay, you don't need to remember the ISA number. That is not a requirement in AA exam, okay. Neither in the AAA they are not required, so don't put extra burden. You may write a wrong ISA in the exam and the marks will be deducted for that, but writing the right ISA will not give you any mark. So always prefer not to write the number of the ISA, just write according to the ISAs. According to the ISAs. Fine. So sufficient and appropriate. The evidence, the audit evidence should be sufficient and appropriate whenever you come to any conclusion, whether it is a good conclusion or whether it is a bad conclusion. Now, what is sufficient and what is appropriate? By sufficient, I mean quantity of the evidence. I mean the quantity of the evidence. On what factors does this quantity depends on? Like the quantity should be more or quantity should be less. On what factor does this depends on? Number one, it depends on the risk of the account balance, which we consider in the planning stage. When you assess the risks, we did this in the previous classes, the risk assessment, where you assess the audit risk of any account balance or any classification. So that is how we assess the risk. So if the risk is more, the quantity of the evidence should be more. The evidence should be more sufficient. So if the risk is less, then the quantity could also be less. So less quantity will be accepted as the sufficient evidence. The second factor on which sufficiency depends is the materiality. You guys also know about the materiality. I have covered this in previous classes. Those of you who have joined now, they can refer back to the recordings. Materiality is by size and by nature, and there are some thresholds for the materiality by size, so you can see it in the previous recordings. So if an account balance is more material, if it is material, then the quantity of the evidence should be more. There is a direct relationship. If the account balance is less material or it is immaterial, then less quantity of evidence will work. Third factor is controls, internal controls. Now, how do I relate with them? If the controls are effective, okay, if the controls are effective and they are strong, what do I mean by effectiveness? By effectiveness, I mean that the objective is being met. What is efficiency? Efficiency is that everything is being done at the right time. That is efficiency. But effectiveness is that the objective is being met. So if the objective of putting the controls is being met, okay, and the controls are strong, then you require less quantity of audit evidence. There is now indirect relationship. Stronger the control, lesser the quantity of evidence. Reverse relationship. Weaker the controls or less stronger the controls, more quantity of evidence. The fourth factor on which the sufficiency depends is the auditor's knowledge. If it is a new client, if the auditor is auditing the entity for the first time, he has no previous knowledge about the client, he will require more quantity of evidence for every account balance, because he doesn't know the client, he doesn't know how he operates, what is the nature of the business, he has no previous experience with the client. So that's how the relation works. And then the source of the evidence. What is the source of the evidence? Is it coming from the management or the employees or from the third parties? If it is coming from the management, I need more quantity, right? And if it is coming from the third parties, I will require less. If in even one external confirmation I get, if the, for example, I have a provision in my statement of financial position, that is the balance sheet, I have a provision for ongoing case, legal case. I have created this provision because there is more than, like around 50% of chance, 50 to 55% of chance is there that I will lose the case and I have to pay 10,000 bucks to the court. Okay. So in this case, the auditor, what he will do is, rather asking the management, he will prefer the confirmation from the advocates or the legal advisors. These are the words you can use. Legal advisors who will give me in written, they will give me in written that this is the probability of paying the fine. So even if I get just one written confirmation from the legal advisor stating that the probability is 80%, I will record the provision. The auditor will pressurize the management to record the provision, whereas the management is saying that no, we will win the case. According to the management, they are overconfident and they are not ready to, record the provision because they think that they will win the case. So this is the source I am talking about, and if it is from the third parties, I require less of the audit evidence. If it is from the management, I require more of the audit evidence. Then another is reliability. Again, reliability is written or verbal. If it is a verbal evidence, I require more of it. If it is a written evidence, even one is enough. So this was sufficiency of audit evidence depending on the factors like risk, materiality, internal controls, auditor's knowledge, source, and reliability. Then we have appropriateness of audit evidence. What is the appropriateness of audit evidence? Basically, it is two things: that it should be reliable and it should be relevant. Now you know the hierarchy for the reliability, that is third party is greater than the management and written evidence is greater than the verbal one. You know what is reliability. But what is relevance? Relevance is it should relate to that particular class of transaction which I am auditing at the moment. There should be relatability. That is being relevant. It should be appropriate. So basically, in all, appropriateness is the quality of the audit evidence. So according to the ISAs, The audit evidence should be sufficient and appropriate. Fine. So now moving forward, what is the difference between audit procedure and between the audit evidence? Audit procedure versus the audit evidence. You know the stages of the audit. Again, just for your flow, I will tell you how the things start. The thing starts with the client acceptance. There is a different ISA for client acceptance. There is a different ISA for client acceptance, which I will be covering when we are done with the important areas. Then, what is the second thing that happens? The second thing, if the client is accepted, is the planning stage. What happens in the planning stage is the first of all, two meetings are held. The first meeting is being held with the management, the engagement partner, and the management head has a meeting. And what you gather from this meeting is the understanding. That is ISA 315 understanding. Understanding of the entity and its environment. Second meeting is held within the audit team before the start of audit. What they do in this second meeting, they discuss about the risky areas and how they will proceed the audit. So basically, risk assessment takes place. What is risk assessment? The audit risk part, right? How you assess the risk, you know this. That is also by AEIOU. Fine. So this is the planning stage. Then the third stage, the most important one on which we are now, is the evidence stage. What happens in this evidence stage is first you check the controls, the internal controls, if they are effective or not. We are yet to cover this part. This will be covered next week. Then, depending upon the risk and the controls, we then form the procedures, the substantive procedures, in-depth checking, right? And from that procedures, we get some evidences. So our objective of this evidence stage was to get some evidence. So by performing procedures, we are checking the assertions and gathering the evidence. Then after the evidence stage, you have the final stage, review and reporting. Review and reporting. Now the audit work will be reviewed and then reported in the form of audit report to the shareholders. So this is the whole process of the audit. We have completed the planning stage. We are done. We are going to be done with the evidence stage, as controls are an exception to it. And then we will start with the review and reporting part. So when I say the difference between audit procedures and audit evidence, procedures are something which are performed to check the assertions, to ensure the assertions. What are assertions? Assertions are the promises made by the management. When the auditor assesses that the promises made by the management are true, and the evidence is the documents which they get from that procedure. So if I say that one of the procedure is recalculate the depreciation charge to ensure the mathematical accuracy. To ensure its mathematical accuracy. This is the procedure. This is the procedure. But what is the evidence? The evidence will be the working paper on which recalculation was performed. Working paper on which recalculation of the depreciation charge was performed to check its or to ensure its mathematical accuracy. That is evidence. This is a document form. Everything is in document form. So if the procedure is that send the circularization of receivables or do the circularization of receivables to check their existence. This is the procedure. What is the evidence? The evidence is the circularization letter which was sent to the receivables to check the existence. You getting the difference between the procedures and the evidences? Now, the main thing, skill. Skill, or you can say tips to write procedures. How you should write procedures in your exam. Number one tip is use of audit words. What are audit words? Confirmation letter, circularization letter, confirmation statement, supplier statement, credit check limit. Other audit words are review, reperform, analyze, evaluate, trace. You can write these. Obtain. Other than that, you can also write ensure, recalculate, verify. Then in what to verify, what to review, what to reperform, what to analyze. For that, you should use words, exact words like purchase ledger, the goods received notes, GRN, GDN, the bank statements, the bank letters, the loan agreement, the title deeds. Right? So these are the use of audit words. Yeah, you can take the screenshot. Should I move further? Okay, I am moving further now. Yeah. So that was the first tip, that you have to use audit words. Don't use the words like check or double check, or just you say that check the receivables. That is so vague. How you are going to write a procedure? I will tell you the weightage of the procedures. The single line of procedures. The second tip is you get 0.5 mark. As I said, each procedure should be short and cute in one line, right? So it is of 1 mark. One procedure is for 1 mark. So 0.5 marks or half a mark is given to what to do. What to do. This question is given half mark. Like what to do, what includes review the control account. Half a mark will you will get for this statement, or reconcile the control account with the memorandum. This is what I'm talking about, the auditor, not the management. Procedures are for the auditor. That's what auditor does. So you will get half a mark for that. Now, half a mark stands what usually people forget when they write the procedure, that what you are checking, why are you doing this? Second half a mark is allocated to the question why. For what? That is when the assertions come into picture. That is when the assertions come into the picture. So if I am checking an item of statement of profit and loss and I say reconcile the control account with the memorandum, if suppose I am talking about the purchases, so I will say reconcile the purchase ledger with the control account and then with the memorandum to ensure its occurrence, or to ensure its completeness, or to ensure its accuracy. Recalculate the invoice figures taking into account the tax codes and the discount to ensure its mathematical accuracy. So when I said mathematical accuracy, that is why I am doing that thing, why I am recalculating. So writing a very long procedure without these two things will give you 0 mark. But writing a short procedure with inclusion of both of these things will give you 1 mark. Procedures are the best places where you can score marks. Whether it is double A or triple A. The both of these exams have same kind of procedures. The double A, what is the benefit in double A is there are direct questions and the procedures are very, in double A the questions are direct, like simply list the procedures you could perform, the auditor should perform for depreciation charge, right? So again you will say recalculate the depreciation charge. If I just write this, usually people do this. If I just write this, it will just give you half a mark. But I have to get a full 1 mark. I will write recalculate the depreciation charge to ensure its mathematical accuracy. Right? That's how you write the procedures. Now we will move further where I will be, covering the procedures. They are given in your notes for specific areas. So I will open the notes in my system. You guys have them with you. They are being uploaded on the Google Classroom. You can also visit the notes and you have to read them again and again. You shouldn't be learning them by heart, because now I have imparted so much knowledge to you. You guys should be able to write it yourself, but just go through them again and again, so that you have the basic knowledge about how to write them, right? So let's see, and let's do these procedures. Let's say let's see how they look like. This is the most important part. Okay, from here it starts. Procedures on specific areas. I think we won't be able to cover everything today, so you guys can read it at home also. But I will cover the most important procedures, like for sales, for purchases, for capital expenditure, and for payroll, and for inventory. Others you can read at home, you will easily understand them, right? So let's do that. Substantive procedures on receivables. What is the key risk of receivables? I hope you can see my screen, everyone. The key risk is overstatement, as I told you, because it is an asset. So receivables are deemed to be at a risky position because they could be overstated to present a lucrative picture to the potential investors. Then circularization, we have receivable circularization here. Circularization is third party confirmation of receivables. Types of receivable confirmation letter. You know what is positive confirmation, you know what is negative confirmation. Positive confirmation is receivable asked to agree with the stated balance or write the balance owing. So he is asked to agree or disagree, both, that you have the balance of 20,000 or not. That is positive confirmation. Negative confirmation is he is asked to reply only if he disagrees. Only if he disagrees with the balance, only then he will reply. But as I told you, this is a risky confirmation letter. It is a risky kind of circularization. Why? Because he may or may not reply. So it only takes place when the audit client has a strong internal control system over the sales and trade receivables. Other good corroborative evidence with regard to existence of trade receivables has already been obtained from other tests carried out. So you have another good evidences, corroborative evidences from third parties other than the receivables, by which you are sure that the balance is 20,000. There are large number of small balances. So when there are large number of small balances, I can't just ask every receivable to give back reply. So I ask for the negative confirmation, because anyway the balance is immaterial because it is small. So just a negative confirmation is sufficient. And then a substantial number of errors is not expected. It explains for itself. Fine. Then the method of sending the confirmation letter. First, you obtain the receivables ledger, and then you reconcile it to the control account. You obtain the receivable ledger, reconcile it to the control account. Then you select a sample of debtors to be circularized. Not all debtors are circularized, but a sample. A few out of them are circularized. A few out of them are being made to be sent the confirmation letter, or the negative or positive confirmation letter. Then you inform the client of the intended list. Now, when I told you guys, there is a customer statement that is obtained by the management on monthly basis. But we are now talking about the confirmation letter, not the customer statement. That is being sent on the demand of the auditor. So after selecting the sample of the debtor, the auditor informs the client about the intended list of the debtors. He then get the details of the debtors and prepare letters on the client's letterhead. I told you this point. get the letter signed by a senior person at the client. The auditor gets the letter signed by the senior person. He then record the names and amount to be circularized. Then he post or fax letters, ensuring the replies are sent directly to the auditor. Though the letters are being sent on the client's letterhead, but the replies come back directly to the auditor. Then record replies received and test the ones not agreed. For the non-replies now. Now, what is the non-replies? If I sent a confirmation letter to the receivable and he didn't reply, with the client's permission, the team should arrange to send a follow-up circularization. Now you will do a follow-up. You will again send a confirmation letter. If the receivable does not respond to the follow-up, then with the client's permission, the senior should telephone the customer and ask whether they are able to respond in writing to the circularization request. The auditor will telephone it with the client's permission. If they are still non-responses, then the auditor should undertake alternative procedures to confirm receivables. These procedures include verifying post-year-end receipts from that customer, verifying order placement and dispatch documentation, and carrying out bad debt procedures. So, if the customer is still not replying, he didn't reply to my letter, he didn't reply to my call. So, what I will do is I will perform alternative procedures. Now, what are the alternative procedures? The alternative procedure is audit trail, that is tracing and vouching. Another audit procedure is verifying the post year end receipts. So if the year is completed and then I get some money from that receivable, if I will, the receivable had a balance of 20,000, and after the year end in my bank statement I have a receipt of 20,000 from that receivable, that means that balance of receivable was correct. I need not have any confirmation letter because anyhow I got that balance, right? So I got that money from that receivable, that means that was the actual amount which was the balance of the customer at the year end, because the audit takes place for a particular year. So whatever happens after the year end could also be taken into account, because the audit happens after the year end, for the year end, after the year end, right? So these procedures include verifying post year end receipts from that customer, verifying order placement, that is the order received note, and dispatch documentation. What is dispatch documentation? The GDN. And carrying out the bad debt procedures. What are bad debt procedures? The aged receivable ledger is being checked. So if there are any slow moving receivables, what is slow moving receivables? As I told you yesterday also, what are slow moving receivables? We have this aged receivables ledger where every the every customer or every debtor is there, and there is a aggregated form of the receivables. So that ledger has some columns like the customer name, the amount he owes, and since how long he hasn't paid to us, 0 to 30 days, 0 to 45 days, 45 to 60 days, 60 to 90 days. If he has reached this stage, then there is a risk that he is a bad debt. So I need to pass the entry of bad debt. I need to provide a provision for bad debt. I need to remove him from my receivables list. So that is what we mean by bad debts procedure. Checking the aged receivables ledger, right? Then we have for responses with differences. the customers who replied, but there were differences of what they have in their accounts and what I have in my account. So the auditor should identify any disputed amounts, identify whether these relate to timing differences or whether there are possible errors in the records of the client. Whether the difference is due to the timing difference, that maybe when I sent an invoice to my customer, I recorded the receivable there and then. But the customer received that invoice after 30 days, so he don't know at the 15th day that he is being invoiced. So according to him, the invoice of $45, which I have already included when I sent the invoice, he has not recorded that invoice of $45 on the 15th day. So that is due to the timing differences. Okay. So any differences due to timing, such as cash in transit, should be matched with cash received after the year end. What is cash in transit? Cash in transit is that I have, suppose, NEFT. You know what happens in India? You do a bank transfer or you give a check to somebody. So you have given a check. That person, when you signed the check, you said that when you signed the check, you recorded it in your accounts that you have given away the money. But when the person or the payable person, when he will receive that check or he will deposit that check in the bank, that is when he will actually cut off your account balance from your account. So if he's my payable, I gave him a check. So according to me, I have paid my amount. I have paid 10,000 to him, but he has not yet recorded it because he has not deposited the check yet. So that is cash in transit. Then the receivable ledger should be reviewed to identify any possible misstatements or mispostings, as this could be a reason for a response with a difference. So maybe you have done some misposting, as we said yesterday, you have recorded sales in your purchases account. So this is a kind of misposting. If any balance have been flagged as disputed by the receivable, then these should be discussed with the management to identify whether a written down is necessary. So you need to make sure whether if the person is not replying or he has replied but there is a disputed figure, maybe he is not in a condition to pay, so he is a bad debt. So now this is how you write procedures for the receivables. For example, for the existence of the receivables, because receivables are a part of financial position statement, balance sheet, so you will check their existence. You will say circularization of a sample of period end receivables to check the existence, to ensure their existence. They have not written this here because they wrote existence here. But you will not write your answers in this form in the exam. You will write circularization of a sample of period and receivables to check their or to ensure their existence. Second, you will write verify audit trail from records to the source documents. Select a sample of year and receivable balances and agree back to the valid supporting documentation of GDN and sales order to ensure existence. That's how you write. They've written the second one totally correct. Then accuracy, valuation, and allocation. Again, circularization, invoice, inspect the invoice and recalculate the invoice to ensure its valuation. Recoverability or the bad debts procedure. These are the bad debts procedure. Select a significant sample of receivables and review whether there are any after date cash receipts to ensure that a sample of slow moving or old receivable balance is also selected. So if you have a balance of 10,000 in your receivables account for customer A, and then you will check your balance or your bank statement after the year end whether you have actually received the 10,000 or not. Then you will review the aged receivable ledger to identify any slow moving or old receivable balances. Discuss the status of these balances with the credit controller to assess whether they are likely to pay or not. So what is the credit? Who is the credit controller? He is a person who controls the credit. He's the person who looks that how the customers are paying back, in which duration they are paying me back. He checks the persons to whom I have provided the credit. So he's a credit controller. So you discuss it with the credit controller. Calculate the average receivable days and compare this to the previous year. Investigate any significant differences. This is a point of analytical procedures where you are actually calculating ratios, comparing it to the prior year, and investigating any significant differences. Then review customer correspondence to identify any balances which are in dispute or unlikely to be paid. Review the board minutes. So in customer correspondence, you can actually see if the customer said something about his liquidity, that he has some money to pay back or not, right? Review the board minutes to identify whether there are any significant concerns in relation to payment by customers. Board minutes are comes from the meetings, annual general meetings, or any meetings that happens between the directors and the influential members of the entity. Then, then the allowance procedures for the allowance of doubtful debts. Allowance is the provision. Recalculate to ensure it is accurate, ensure rational or basis reasonable and in line with your understanding of the client's business. Written representation from management that the assumptions are reasonable and the allowance is adequate. This is something you will find everywhere, written representation. What is written representation? Written representation is something you obtain from the management. It is a confirmation from the management. When you don't get any kind of third party evidence, you then go to the management and ask them to give you something in the written form that they agree on this. So this is the least reliable source of evidence, written representation. It is not a proper evidence. It is a kind of you can say supporting evidence. So you will write obtain written evidence from the management that the assumptions are reasonable and the allowance is adequate. Inspect post year end sales returns, credit notes, and consider whether an additional allowance against receivable is required. Right? Then, how you check the rights and obligations of the receivables? Oh, wait. How you check the rights and obligations? That you can check by checking the invoices. Yeah, so you can again circularize, inspect the invoice, confirm the right over the receivable. Then how you can check the completeness, again the audit trail from the source document to the record. When you move from source document to the record, that is tracing. So it is a kind of audit trail. So use the word verify the audit trail from source documents to record. Select a sample of goods dispatch note and agree to valid supporting documentation of invoice. Ensure these invoices have been entered in the days book, individual ledgers. Ensure the individual ledger is reconciled with the control account. Compare ratios of this period to prior periods and budgets. Investigate any significant differences. Ensure all disclosures relevant to receivables have been made. So now, because you have all the knowledge with you, it is very easy for you to write the procedures. You know what is control account, you know what is memorandum, you know everything now, right? So it is very, you know what is cut off. So now this is your homework to read the the procedures once. We will have one class during the week because we have not completed the procedures. I will conduct a class for the inventory count procedures where I will have a discussion over that. Inventory count, the payroll, the capital expenditure, And what else we have? Accruals, provisions, bank and cash is something you can do yourself, right? So that's the audit procedures. So give it a try. Try to do it yourself. Now you have all the knowledge, you know what all documents are there. You can come up with your doubts, or I will see if we have a short class during the week, or we can do this the next weekend also, along with the controls part, because controls will take very less time. So, any doubts, guys? Any doubts? Now you know. Okay, great. So now you know the skill of writing the procedures. Yeah, thanks, Nabil. So, guys, I will also upload this recording in the Google Classroom, and let's see when we will have on the next class for the completion of the procedures. You have the notes with you. Try and go, try to do it yourself. First, try to do it yourself. Then we will also have a brief discussion. Next class day will be confirmed on the group, Nabil. I will post it on the group according to the work, because I have work during the week. I'm working, so I have to look for the office hours and everything. I'll be able to confirm you on the group by Tuesday. Okay? So Eid Mubarak, guys, and stay safe. I hope it was a helpful session. Uh, you can ask your doubts anytime you want. You can text them on the Google Classroom, or you can inbox me. General queries could be taken on the group, the TG Professional Support. And also, guys, just a small request. Do spread this information about the classes. We can help most of the people. And also, yeah, I will add you, Nabil, in the Google Classroom. And when you view the recordings, keep on subscribing to my channel. That would be very helpful. The recordings which are being uploaded on the YouTube. Okay. So bye guys, I'm ending the meeting here. I suppose you guys have no doubts. Bye bye. Take care.